In the summer of 1986, a jet roared across the big screen and into pop culture history. Top Gun wasn't just a movie, it was a phenomenon. With leather jackets, aviators, and roaring F-14s, it captured the adrenaline-fueled fantasy of flight and turned it into a global obsession. But while audiences were mesmerized by high-flying dogfights and 80s swagger, what unfolded behind the scenes was even more dramatic, and sometimes downright shocking. From Pentagon interference and real-life tragedy to last-minute reshoots and studio clashes, the story of how Top Gun came to life is as wild as anything Maverick ever pulled in the air. 1. A movie that became military propaganda. What many viewers didn't realize was that Top Gun wasn't just entertaining, it was a recruitment weapon. After the film's release, US Navy enlistment skyrocketed by a staggering 500%. The military didn't just benefit from the movie's popularity, they were in on it from the start. The Department of Defense provided access to aircraft carriers, F-14 Tomcats, and real Navy pilots, but only under one condition: final script approval. The Pentagon scrubbed scenes that portrayed the military in a bad light. Deaths and mishaps were softened or removed entirely. Even the climactic dogfight was rewritten to satisfy the Navy's image control. Still, Tony Scott, the film's director, fought to keep the film edgy and stylish. And the compromise worked. Top Gun looked cool, sounded cool, and made countless viewers want to fly jets. Recruitment booths were set up right inside movie theaters, capturing the enthusiasm while it was still fresh. In the end, Top Gun was more than just a blockbuster. It was a successful collaboration between Hollywood and the Pentagon, and a shining example of cinematic propaganda with a pair of Ray-Bans on top. 2. The Maverick who almost wasn't. It's impossible to imagine Top Gun without Tom Cruise's cocky grin behind the throttle. But shockingly, Cruise wasn't the studio's first choice to play Pete Maverick Mitchell. Before he landed the role, actors like Matthew Modine, Emilio Estevez, and even Patrick Swayze were considered. Modine passed, disliking the film's pro-military tone. Cruise was intrigued only after seeing Tony Scott's previous film, The Hunger. He met with producers on a motorcycle, and the rest, as they say, is history. At the time, Tom Cruise wasn't yet the box office titan we know today. He had shown promise in films like Risky Business and All the Right Moves, but he hadn't headlined a major action movie, and studio executives were nervous. Could he carry a high-stakes military film with jet-fueled visuals and macho bravado? Cruise was determined to prove them wrong. Rather than just act like a pilot, Cruise wanted to be one, at least as much as was realistically possible. He underwent intense aviation training and insisted on flying in actual F-14 Tomcats alongside seasoned Navy pilots. These weren't joyrides. The G-forces during maneuvers were so extreme they caused him to throw up repeatedly. Most actors would have tapped out, but Cruise kept climbing back into the cockpit, flight after flight. That relentless dedication won over real pilots, who initially viewed the Hollywood crew with skepticism. They came to respect Cruise for treating their world seriously. His experience in the sky didn't just prepare him for the role, it helped define it. The swagger, the confidence, the thrill-seeking edge of Maverick all stemmed from Cruise's personal dive into naval aviation. But he also pushed for emotional authenticity. Cruise worked closely with director Tony Scott to shape Maverick's internal journey, especially after Goose's tragic death. He wanted the audience to feel the weight of that loss, not just as a plot point, but as a psychological shift. Interestingly, Cruise was also instrumental in influencing how Maverick interacted with authority. He suggested adding moments of quiet vulnerability beneath the bravado, especially in scenes with Viper and Charlie. The goal wasn't just to play a hotshot, it was to show the cracks behind the confidence. That complexity helped set Maverick apart from the typical 80s action archetype. By the time Top Gun hit theaters, Cruise wasn't just an actor anymore, he was a full-blown movie star. The film catapulted him into global superstardom, and the role of Maverick became his signature. In many ways, the cockpit of that F-14 was Cruise's true launch pad, and he's been soaring ever since. 3. A tragedy inspired by reality. One of Top Gun's most heartbreaking scenes is the death of Goose, played by Anthony Edwards. What most fans don't realize is that this emotional gut punch was based on a real-life accident. In 1983, 2 Navy pilots flying an F-14 had to eject mid-flight during a training mission. One pilot survived, but the other hit the canopy and died instantly, just like Goose. Writers Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr. had scoured real military reports for inspiration, and this tragic incident was woven into the script to reflect the inherent dangers of aviation. Edward spent time with actual aviators to portray the grief realistically, while Tom Cruise later admitted it was the hardest scene he ever had to film. The Navy feared the scene might scare off recruits, but it had the opposite effect. Audiences connected with the emotional stakes. Goose's death transformed Top Gun from pure spectacle into a story of loss, guilt, and growth. It made Maverick human. It made the movie unforgettable. 4. Sunset, sabotage, and cinematic rebellion. Director Tony Scott was a visionary, but not always a rule follower. During one shoot aboard an aircraft carrier, he wanted the perfect golden hour shot of a jet silhouetted against the setting sun. There was just one problem. The ship was heading the wrong direction for the light. The captain refused to turn the vessel. So Scott did something wild. He wrote a $25,000 check from the studio's budget and handed it to the crew to turn the ship around. The shot, which lasts mere seconds in the final film, became one of the most iconic images in Top Gun. But when Paramount found out, they nearly fired Scott on the spot. It was Cruise who intervened, telling the studio that Scott was the only one who gets it. That vote of confidence saved Scott's job and preserved the film's sleek visual style. The incident proved that sometimes greatness requires bending the rules. And in this case, Scott's rebellion gave Top Gun its visual soul. 5. Iceman's reluctant rise. Val Kilmer's Iceman, the perfectly composed, razor-sharp rival to Maverick, wasn't born out of passion. Kilmer didn't even want the part. He was contractually obligated to audition for Top Gun, and he did so sarcastically, assuming it would sabotage his chances. Instead, his detached performance matched the cold, competitive nature of Iceman perfectly. The producers were sold. On set, Kilmer and Cruise reportedly clashed. Cruise was hyper-focused, while Kilmer embraced a looser, spontaneous approach. But rather than being a problem, the tension between them enhanced their characters' rivalry. Director Tony Scott encouraged the friction, knowing it would fuel the drama. Kilmer eventually embraced the role, studying real pilots to perfect his demeanor. His now iconic line, "You're dangerous," became a fan favorite. Decades later, he returned in Top Gun, Maverick, delivering a poignant performance that brought closure to his character and emotional depth to the sequel. Sometimes, the roles we resist become the ones we're remembered for. 6. A love scene born from a studio note. The steamy love scene between Maverick and Charlie wasn't in the original script. In fact, it didn't even exist until test audiences demanded more chemistry between the leads. Months after production had wrapped, the studio ordered a reshoot to add intimacy, and fast. The problem? Both Cruise and Kelly McGillis were already working on other projects. Cruise had cut his hair short, which created continuity issues. The solution? Film the scene in shadows and silhouette. Shot in moody blue lighting on a minimal, makeshift set, the now famous love scene between Maverick and Charlie wasn't originally in the script, and wasn't even part of the film until months after principal photography had wrapped. When early test audiences watched Top Gun, their biggest complaint wasn't the lack of action or thrills, it was the absence of romantic chemistry. They wanted a deeper emotional connection between the leads. The studio listened and ordered an additional scene to fill that gap. But there was a challenge. Both Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis had already moved on to other projects. Cruise had cut his hair short for The Color of Money, and McGillis was committed to other work. Continuity was suddenly a nightmare. Director Tony Scott faced a tough choice: either scrap the idea or get creative. He chose the latter. To hide the hair differences and create a sense of intimacy, the scene was shot almost entirely in silhouette with a cool blue filter. That lighting, born from necessity, became a stylistic triumph. The set was stripped down and the scene filmed quickly, but its emotional impact was undeniable. With Berlin's Take My Breath Away playing over it, a song that would go on to win an Academy Award for Best Original Song, the scene became a cultural landmark. The music, the lighting, the longing glances, it all came together to deliver an unforgettable moment that elevated the film's emotional core. Kelly McGillis later remarked that the scene added vital dimension to her character, Charlie. Without it, the relationship between her and Maverick would have felt incomplete. a flirtation without substance. The added intimacy gave their dynamic meaning and made Maverick more than just a reckless ace pilot. It showed his vulnerability, his longing, and his need for connection. Ironically, what started as a last-minute studio note, often the bane of creative projects, turned into one of Top Gun's most defining elements. It expanded the film's audience, softened its machismo, and added a touch of elegance to an otherwise testosterone-fueled ride. Sometimes, lightning in a bottle doesn't come from careful planning. It comes from a problem solved just right. 7. Sky-high chaos and real danger. While CGI is king today, Top Gun relied on real Navy pilots flying real jets. But filming those high-speed aerial sequences was anything but smooth. Tony Scott often gave the pilots vague instructions like, "Just do something cool." What followed was stunning but unpredictable. One pilot dove so steeply that the camera operator blacked out mid-shot. Others had footage ruined by condensation inside the camera housing. Because of the complexity and danger, usable footage averaged only a few minutes per hour of flight. Insurance premiums soared, and after one near accident, production halted temporarily. Still, the crew pressed on. The result was visceral, thrilling, and authentic. No models, no green screen, just raw footage of real jets in real airspace. Top Gun set a new standard for air combat on film, and few have matched it since. Every jet roar, every roll, every sonic boom was real. That kind of danger can't be faked, and it gave the film its unmatched intensity. 8. The battle of inches behind the scenes. Here's something most viewers never noticed. Kelly McGillis, who played Charlie, was noticeably taller than Tom Cruise. She stood at around 5 feet 10 inches, while Cruise was about 5 feet 7 inches. To balance their height difference, the filmmakers got creative. Cruise often stood on apple boxes or walked on raised platforms. Cinematographers shot from low angles, and in wide shots, McGillis subtly adjusted her stance. Even the love scene, filmed in shadows, helped conceal the height disparity. This visual balancing act became a regular practice in Cruise's future films. But Top Gun was one of the first major productions to require it so frequently. Still, the chemistry between Cruise and McGillis felt genuine, and audiences never suspected a thing. It's a testament to filmmaking magic. In Hollywood, even a few inches can shape a scene, and Top Gun pulled it off flawlessly. 9. When sound became a character. Beyond visuals and acting, Top Gun pushed the boundaries of cinematic sound. The audio team recorded actual F-14 engine roars, jet turbine whines, and cockpit sounds straight from the Navy. Then they layered those recordings with synthesized bass and effects to make every scene pulse with energy. The result? A theater experience so intense that speakers in some cinemas blew out during early test screenings. The film's sound design was so advanced that it helped promote new technologies like Dolby Stereo SR. The opening scene alone featured over 120 separate audio tracks. Every breath, click, and sonic boom was crafted to place audiences inside the cockpit. The effort paid off. Top Gun won the Academy Award for Best Sound. Its techniques became a blueprint for future blockbusters, and it proved that in action films, sound isn't just background, it's part of the story. 10. A life lost in the skies. Behind the glamour and glory of Top Gun lies a real tragedy. During filming, legendary stunt pilot Art Scholl was killed while attempting a spin maneuver in his camera plane. He was capturing background footage for an aerial sequence when he radioed, "I've got a problem here," and then disappeared into the Pacific Ocean. Neither his body nor his plane was ever recovered. Art Scholl was 53 years old when tragedy struck during the filming of Top Gun. A legendary figure in both the aviation and film industries, Scholl wasn't just a pilot, he was an aerial cinematography pioneer. He had spent decades capturing jaw-dropping footage for major Hollywood productions, always pushing the limits of what was possible in the skies. By the time he joined the Top Gun crew, Scholl was revered for his precision, skill, and passion for flight. His presence on the set brought a sense of authenticity and credibility that no special effect could replicate. During production, Scholl was flying his Pitts S2 camera plane, performing a spin maneuver off the Southern California coast to capture background footage meant to be used in one of the film's jet sequences. But mid-flight, something went wrong. Scholl radioed in, saying, "I've got a problem here." Seconds later, he lost control. His plane spiraled out of the sky and crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Despite intensive search efforts, neither the plane nor Scholl's body was ever recovered. The loss stunned the entire production team. Filming was immediately halted as cast and crew grappled with the reality of what had just happened. This wasn't a stunt gone wrong on a soundstage. This was a man who had risked his life to bring realism to the screen and paid the ultimate price. Director Tony Scott later described Scholl's death as a sobering reminder that despite all precautions, aerial filmmaking remains incredibly dangerous. Even with the Navy's involvement and strict safety protocols, the skies could not be fully tamed. The footage Scholl was capturing that day was never used in the final cut, but his contribution was immortalized in a quiet, powerful way. At the end of Top Gun, a tribute appears for Art Scholl, pilot, aerial photographer, and friend. It's brief, but for those who knew him or knew of him, it speaks volumes. Many modern stunt pilots cite Scholl as their inspiration. His work lives on in the techniques, bravery, and storytelling that define aerial cinematography today. In a film that celebrated the thrill of flight, Scholl's death served as a haunting reminder. Behind every exhilarating moment in the skies, there are real people with real risks. And sometimes, the cost of cinematic greatness is tragically human. In the decades since its release, Top Gun has remained a cultural touchstone. It redefined the action genre, inspired generations of aviators, and cemented Tom Cruise as a global icon. But its success came from more than just cool jets and catchy songs. It came from bold creative choices, from pushing boundaries, and from the risks, emotional, physical, and artistic, that everyone involved was willing to take. From Pentagon deals and reluctant stars to tragic accidents and last-minute reshoots, the making of Top Gun is a story of vision, conflict, and passion. It's proof that even the most polished films are born from chaos, and that sometimes the greatest cinematic legends start not in the skies but behind the scenes.